Hello, I'm Yuzuki. Tonight, let's leave the busy world behind. You've worked hard, and now it's time for your heart to rest. Imagine a mountain pass bathed in moonlight, where a quiet miracle is waiting for you. Close your eyes, find your breath, and let the cool evening breeze lead you into a deep, dreamless sleep. A blue mist curls around your ankles. Beyond the fortress walls of old Edo, the only sound in the stillness is the soft rhythm of straw sandals on a mountain path. Shh! The dry silver grass brushes against Jubei's ears like a whisper. The tall stalks sway in the moonlight, looking like a shimmering ocean, sighing softly as the wind passes through them. At Jubei's waist hang two swords. These cold pieces of steel, his lifelong companions, feel unusually heavy tonight. The worn cotton strap digs deep into his shoulder. With every step, the scabbard rubs against his robe with a dull thud. They are no longer weapons of protection. They have become a heavy chest filled with memories he could never cut away. Jubei moves forward, clutching at the empty air for balance, carrying a weight that no cane could support. When he stops to rest, the forest holds its breath. A single drop of dew falls from the tip of a leaf, tap, striking the earth. The night is so quiet that even this tiny ripple echoes through the dark. Beneath his bamboo hat, Jubei's eyes flicker. Shadows of exhaustion gather in the corners of his eyes, and his breath rises from his cracked lips like a thin thread of silk. People say the world is peaceful now, that the scent of blood has faded. Under the street lamps, laughter scatters like flower petals, and children dream of tomorrow's festivals. But inside Jubei, a fire still flickers. The cold sensation of the blade, the memory of striking to protect someone. It remains etched in the calluses of his palms. The days of unsheathing his sword are over, but he has never unlocked the gate to his heart. For decades, he lived like a bowstring pulled tight. His body is as rigid as unbending bamboo, and even in his sleep, his thin fingers reach for the hilt of his sword. The night air pierces through his skin, reaching the very bottom of his soul. As he climbs higher, moonlight falls over his shoulders like stardust. Even this brilliant light feels like a dull ache. It is the sorrow of things that fade. Mono no aware. His once great swordsmanship, his unwavering loyalty, tonight they feel like smoke disappearing under the moon. Jubei leans against a mossy rock and lets out a deep sigh. A cold void opens in his chest. Behind the name of a samurai, the small boy he once was, the boy who only wanted a warm embrace, cries out. He thought that boy had died in the dust of the battlefield. But in this silence, he finally lifts his head. Then it happens. From the ridge beyond the mist, A strange sound breaks the heavy silence. Thump, thud, thump, thud. It is not the scream of steel cutting through the air. It is a warm, soft echo, something gentle striking wood. The sound begins to settle the restless beating of Jubei's heart. There is no edge to this sound, no greed, no desire to prove anything. It simply comforts the night, filling the forest with a steady, honest rhythm. Without realizing it, Jubei loosens his grip on his sword. His calloused fingers tremble slightly. Through the cold mist comes the faint, sweet scent of grain. The steam of freshly pounded rice wraps around his cold cheeks, melting the frozen knots inside his chest. He adjusts his hat. This time, his step is not a grim march toward a battlefield. It is the step of a lost traveler who has finally seen a distant lantern. He moves toward the summit of Moonlight Pass. He walks carefully, not wanting to disturb the dry earth, but he does not stop. The mist is no longer a shroud for enemies. It is a silk blanket tucked around a tired wanderer. As he nears the top, the sound of the mortar becomes clear. Miraculously, the weight of the swords on his shoulder begins to lift. It is as if the moonlight is gathering that weight bit by bit and carrying it up into the sky. A small stream flows beside the path. Its ripples blend with the rhythmic thumping to create a quiet lullaby. Jubei looks at his reflection in the water. His face, once hidden by his hat, now glows softly in the light. It is not the face of a warrior on edge, but a traveler who has reached the end of a very long journey. Thump, thud, thump, thud. The sound is as close as a heartbeat now. He reaches the summit where an ancient pine tree stands. The mist clears, revealing a sight beyond belief. Amidst a waterfall of stardust, a creature with snow-white fur stands before a jade mortar. Jubei does not reach for his sword. He simply stands and watches. The hands he trained a lifetime to strike with now open wide, ready only to feel the warmth. A drop of dew falls from the edge of his hat. This time, it is not a sound that breaks the silence, but a clear ring that signals a new beginning. The night deepens, and the sound of the mortar continues. Jubei walks slowly into the rising steam. The invisible burdens that pressed upon his shoulders scatter into the grass and vanish. All that remains is the moonlight, the sound of the rice being shaped, and the long, peaceful breath he finally lets out. The night at Moonlight Pass has ended a samurai's long war. For the first time, without clutching a sword, Jubei feels sleep coming for him. Over his closed eyes, a soft blanket of moonlight is gently drawn. Sleep now. You are safe. You are home. The mist rises from the forest floor, thick and indigo, swallowing the roots of the ancient trees. Beneath Jubei's feet, the fallen leaves are damp with dew, exhaling a cool, earthy scent. A strange, heavy silence hangs in the air. Even the occasional cry of a night bird feels muffled, trapped within the foggy veil before it can scatter. Jubei keeps his gaze low beneath the brim of his hat. Each time the hem of his long robe brushes against the tall grass, it makes a soft, rustling sound. Yet his breath remains as still as the surface of a frozen lake. Then, from somewhere beyond the invisible curtain of fog, a sound drifts toward him. Thump, thud, thump, thud. The rhythm is steady and even. As it passes through the trees, the sound feels rounded and soft, like wood polished by time. Jubei's right shoulder twitches instinctively. His left hand moves in a familiar arc, firmly gripping the hilt of the sword at his waist. As his thumb nudges the guard, a sliver of the blade is revealed. A cold, metallic flash that seems to cut through the mist. His senses sharpen, honed by years of survival, and he slowly turns his head toward the source. But something is different. What reaches his heightened nerves is not the sharp, biting energy of steel. Instead, the sound feels as smooth as fine silk brushing against skin each time the wooden pestle strikes the mortar. It creates a deep, resonant thud that feels like a heartbeat rising from the earth itself. It is not a rhythm intended for harm. It is a peaceful beat, one that gathers scattered thoughts and tucks them in for the night. Slowly, Jubei relaxes his grip. The blade slides back into its scabbard with a faint, final click. He pushes back the rim of his hat and stares into the mist. The sound is no longer just something he hears. It is something he feels with his entire body. It is as if he has stepped into a warm bath. A gentle vibration climbs from his ankles to his knees, through his chest, and finally melts away the tension held in his shoulders. A damp breeze, scented with the aroma of fresh wood, brushes his cheek. With every step the mist clears, the sound takes on a clearer shape. With every thump, the fragments of moonlight on the ground seem to ripple outward. With every thud, the silence of the night awakens in a pleasant way. Without realizing it, Jubei begins to walk in time with the rhythm. The veil of suspicion that surrounded him just moments ago has turned into a thread of curiosity, leading him deeper into the heart of the forest. The moss on the rocks glows a silvery blue, drinking in the moonbeams, and dewdrops hang from the leaves like tiny jewels. As Jubei draws closer, the sound becomes three-dimensional. It is no longer just the pounding of a mortar. It is a midnight lullaby, crafted from the very silence of the mountains. His heavy swords feel strangely light tonight, perhaps because of the invisible warmth the sound carries. The mist thins, and a small, flickering light appears in the distance. It is a warm amber glow, softly pushing back the blue night air. Jubei moves toward the place where the light and the sound meet. Slowly, but without stopping, even the sound of his sandals treading on the soft earth blends harmoniously into the rhythm of the pestle. What sight awaits him there? Behind the final curtain of fog, Jubei lets go of his tension and, for the first time, carries only a quiet sense of wonder. The silence of the night remains unbroken. It has simply been filled with a warmth called sound. Behind him, the path he traveled disappears back into the mist. Before him, the threshold to a mystical night stands wide open. The round, solid ring of wood whispers to the hem of his sleeve. It tells him that in this place, swords are no longer needed. Only the flowing moonlight and a quiet mind are required for the journey ahead. He stands still, waiting for one last great resonance. Thump. The forest vibrates. Thud. The air settles. Finally, Jubei lets out a long, light breath. His white sigh mingles with the mist and vanishes into the air. Though the master of the sound is not yet visible, the space created by the rhythm has already erased the last of the walls around his heart. A single drop of dew falls from his hat, merging with the lingering echo. Jubei takes his final step into the heart of the sound, feeling as though he is walking through a beautiful, waking dream. Only when you reach the crest of the pass does the mist begin to thin, revealing its delicate layers. As Jubei takes his final step onto the steep rock, the hazy veil that clouded his vision parts to the left and right, like a sliding silk curtain. Before him lies a secluded plateau, untouched by the lights of human homes or the rustle of wild beasts. The air is filled with a soft blue hue, as if reflecting the deep indigo of the night sky, and at the highest point of the pass stands an ancient weeping willow, its branches draping down like long threads of silver silk. Beneath that tree, the source of the sound reveals itself. In a pool of moonlight, thicker than anywhere else, a small shadow moves busily. With long ears pricked, a white rabbit with soft, downy fur stands before a wooden mortar as large as its own body. Jubei stops in his tracks instinctively. Beneath the brim of his hat, his eyes tremble slightly. Until now, the only night scenes he knew were the sparks of clashing steel and the dark red stains scattered upon the cold earth. But the scene before him feels as though it exists outside of time, mystical and still, like a finely detailed painting. Whether the rabbit knows of Jubei's presence or not, it simply continues to lift the wooden pestle in silence. Each time the pestle cuts through the air, the moonlight clinging to its tip falls away like droplets of water. When the pestle sinks into the mortar with a thump, a dull but warm vibration travels through the ground. The thud of the pestle grazing the side carries a smooth texture, like touching the surface of freshly fired porcelain. Inside the mortar is a mound of dough, with pale steam rising softly. It is more than mere grain. It glows with a radiant light, as if crafted from the cool breeze that blew over the pass all night and the transparent moisture gathered from the tips of leaves. Jubei looks down at his right hand. That hand, covered in calluses and marked by a long scar, is accustomed only to gripping and wielding heavy steel. To him, dew was the cold, heavy liquid that soaked his boots as he pushed through the tall grass of a battlefield at dawn. It felt like the touch of the cold metal that took lives, a hollow trace that evaporated as soon as the sun rose. But the dew forming at the tips of the rabbit's small, soft movements is different. Each time the rabbit carefully kneads the dough, beads of dew with a soft luster form on the surface. They do not look like omens of destruction. They look like crystals of life, meant to fill a hungry stomach and soothe a weary soul. The rabbit's hands are small. In its movements, which seem as light and fragile as down, there is no threat, no boast. Yet, in the way it touches and shapes the dough, there is a strength deeper and firmer than any swordsmanship Jubei has mastered over a lifetime. Before this strange sight, Jubei feels a peculiar sense of awe. A warm, mysterious crack begins to form in his heart. A heart that once believed the pinnacle of the world was the skill of sharpening a blade to cut down an opponent. With every touch of the rabbit's hands, the dough inside the mortar gains a softer texture. Moonlight melts deeply into the surface of the rice cake, making it as smooth and tender as a newborn's cheek. Jubei suddenly realizes that true strength might not lie in the physical dominance of ending a life with a sharp blade. Instead, he senses that the true power of life might reside in those small, soft movements, patiently preparing food for someone unknown and silently embracing their wounded hearts. A night breeze passes through, swaying the willow branches. The rustling of the leaves blends with the sound of the mortar to create an ancient melody. Jubei feels the weight of the sword at his waist anew. It was a tool for protection, yet it was also the weight of a loneliness that required him to sever countless connections. At this moment, however, he completely relaxes his grip. The dew of moonlight created by the rabbit seeps deep into his heart, as if washing away the cold dew of the battlefield. The air grows clearer. The moonlight becomes a silver powder, covering the entire pass, and the rabbit's white fur glows brilliantly in the light. Jubei takes a deep breath. The sweet, toasted scent of grain floating in the air fills his lungs. It pushes away his memories of sweat and steel, awakening the scent of a peaceful evening he had forgotten long ago. Daltogiwa Jubei, Sambuto Okaji. The rabbit still does not look back at Jubei. It simply works the dough over and over, as if handling the world's most precious treasure. Thump, thud, thump, thud. The steady rhythm becomes the heartbeat of the forest, overlapping with Jubei's own pulse. He is no longer an outsider. He has become a witness to this sacred moonlight ritual, receiving the silent blessing of the night with his whole being. The darkness deepens, yet the pass is filled with an even clearer light. In the place where the dew of the battlefield once sat, the dew of moonlight now forms. Where memories of destruction once dwelt, an awe of creation now rises. Jubei adjusts his hat and watches the warm miracle created by the rabbit's small, soft hands for a long time. Here, he finally returns to being just a traveler, dreaming of the night's peace, rather than a warrior. The secret feast beneath the weeping willow continues, and within Jubei's heart, the invisible blade melts away, beginning to flow as a gentle wave of moonlight. The air, which once sighed through the willow branches, now circles in a gentle curve following the rabbit's movements, drifting toward Jubei. Before he knows it, the rabbit plucks the dough from the mortar, rolls it a few times between its palms, and shapes a smooth, oval omochi. The white rice cake, glowing with a translucent light as if made of condensed moonbeams, flies through the air. Jubei reaches out instinctively. Upon his rough palms, which have held nothing but cold sword hilts for a lifetime, lands a soft, heavy warmth, the lingering heat of freshly steamed grain. It is a strange weight. It isn't the crushing pressure of steel upon his shoulders, nor is it the hollow emptiness of the mist. The temperature seeping into his skin is just a fraction warmer than a human touch, and the surface of the rice cake is as smooth and soft as the lining of washed silk. Jubei stares down at the white morsel for a long time. Inside his heart, there were layers of calluses built up over many years. A solid mass of sorrow that no sharp blade could cut and no heavy strike could break. It was an invisible armor he wore to protect himself while crossing nameless mountain passes. Slowly, he brings the omochi to his lips. A savory scent of ripened grain rises with the steam, mingled with the fragrance of clear mountain dew. As he takes a careful bite, the texture against his tongue is light yet chewy, like biting into a piece of a cloud. The subtle sweetness emerging from the center is not overwhelming. It is the honest, deep flavor of grain that has ripened fully under the autumn sun. As that sweetness travels down his throat, a strange ripple shivers through Jubei's chest. The string of tension that had been pressing down on his heart like iron armor suddenly snaps. The warmth of the rice cake spreads through his veins to his fingertips and toes, gently relaxing every muscle that had grown stiff from a lifetime of being on guard. The kind flavor, which deepens with every chew, awakens a warmth he felt long ago, in a cozy room, long before he ever earned the name of a samurai. It was the care someone once gave without condition, a kindness like a lantern that helped him endure the darkest nights. As Jubei swallows, he lets out a deep, unconscious breath. The white mist of his breath vanishing into the air is no longer the sharp, hurried panting of a battlefield. It is the true breath of a human being in need of comfort, a sigh mixed with relief and quiet reflection. The inner loneliness and sorrow that a blade could never reach melt helplessly in the warmth of this small rice cake, blurring his vision with a soft moisture. The moonlight grows thicker until the very air feels like a sweet liquid. The rabbit begins its work once more. Thump, thud, thump, thud. The returning rhythm flows as a gentle beat, filling the empty spaces in Jubei's heart. He pulls his hat down a little lower. The shadow of the brim hides his face, but it cannot hide the slight trembling of his shoulders. He is not standing there as a warrior. He is simply a traveler who has stopped to rest on a difficult path, a person whose heart is being drenched by a small act of hospitality under the moon. Jubei savors every bit of the texture and scent until the last piece of omochi vanishes. This rice cake holds no grand teachings or sharp lectures. It contains only the sincerity of someone who worked the mortar in silence and the quiet embrace of the night stillness. He realizes then that the world is not just filled with enemies to be defeated by force. There is also a kindness that waits for him, as silent and steady as this. The air at the summit is cold, but Jubei's chest feels as warm as if he were cradling a small hearth. He stands up slowly and bows his head toward the rabbit. The rabbit remains focused on its work, offering no word in return, but the moonlight rippling over its white back feels like a silent farewell. Jubei prepares to continue his journey, but his steps are different now. The touch of the earth beneath his feet feels soft, and the weight of the sword on his shoulder no longer feels like a punishment. Instead of the sorrow he must cut away, he walks into the mist carrying a kindness he must cherish. The stillness of the night remains, wrapping around the pass with a mysterious and ancient grace. Willow leaves flutter like silver scales over the path he takes, and the fading sound of the mortar lingers behind him as a gentle echo. It was the sweetest blessing the moonlight could give, a reminder of the breath of life he had forgotten he possessed. The mist now unravels like fine silk threads along the ridge of the pass. As Jubei leaves the plateau behind and steps onto the downward path, the rhythmic thump-thud from behind does not fade. Instead, It follows the curve of his ear and settles into a quiet corner of his heart. The night air has grown even clearer, and tiny droplets of dew floating in the breeze catch the moonlight, sparkling like a scattered galaxy. The scabbard at Jubei's waist, which always rattled with an ominous metallic ring, is now strangely silent. With every step, there is only the soft whisper of his robe brushing against the polished wood, the restless vibration of the blade, the one that used to scrape against the inner walls of the sheath, has completely died down. It is as still as the surface of a lake after a great wave has passed. Even the cold steel seems tamed by the warmth of the moon, staying by his side as a quiet, peaceful weight. His gaze no longer searches for the sharp arc of a sword. Instead, he watches the moonlight settle on the petals of a wild mint flower by the path. The earth beneath his sandals feels as soft as a down quilt. The sound of dry leaves crushing under his feet is no longer a noise that breaks the silence, but a delicate note that completes it. Jubei is in no rush. He feels his breath falling into sync with the slow pulse of the forest, taking each step with quiet intention. Along the descending path, the branches of old pines stretch out like elegant strokes of black ink. The wind blowing through them carries the scent of sun-dried paper and deep forest moss. Jubei looks down at his fingertips. His knuckles, once pale from gripping his sword too tight, have returned to a healthy, warm color. The night air brushing against the back of his hand feels softer than silk. He knows instinctively that tonight he will not dream of running through fields of crimson mist. The echoes of the battlefield, the screams of clashing steel, and the ragged gasps for air have finally gone silent. In their place is the sweet, lingering taste of the omochi and the rhythmic pulse of the rabbit's mortar. This sound has become a lullaby, guiding his spirit toward the deep, blue abyss of a peaceful ocean. Jubei pauses by a flat rock on the wayside, imagining himself setting down all the invisible burdens he carried on his shoulders. He slowly closes his eyes. The night shines with a more mystical light as it deepens. The stars are not cold jewels, but warm lanterns resting on a cloth of dark indigo. The distant, friendly sound of the mortar still gives him a gentle push from behind. Jubei's walk is no longer just a descent down a mountain. It is a journey into a sanctuary called rest. The sword in its sheath is no longer a weapon of war, but a silent witness to the peace of this night. Now, every living thing in the forest seems to bless his rest. The chirping of crickets becomes a low whisper, tickling his ears, and the moon above lays a path of silver velvet for him to walk upon. Jubei feels as light as if he had finally cast off heavy armor and a rusted helmet. The sharp edges of his vigilance have been kneaded soft, like the dough under the rabbit's touch, becoming a smooth surface that holds no more wounds. As he finally reaches the flat ground at the foot of the mountain, Jubei realizes the mist has completely cleared. The road ahead is clear and still. The flickering lights of the village in the distance seem to beckon him home to a deep sleep. Tonight, he will not need to keep his sword by his pillow. The spirits of the forest, guided by the sound of the mortar, will be the sentinels of his dreams. He turns one last time to look at the ridge he descended. There, the moonlight still pours down like a waterfall, and an invisible sound continues to shape the essence of the night. Jubei offers a faint smile and walks forward. The sound of his sandals on the ground becomes a regular, peaceful song melting into the night air. Over the silhouette of the warrior, walking toward the deepest rest, the moonlight falls like a final blessing. His night is no longer lonely, nor is it sharp. Only the memory of the sweet rice cake and the kind rhythm of the mortar will follow him into his dreams, gifting him the most silent sleep in the world. Jubei disappears into the mysterious stillness of the night, carrying true peace at last. It is a beautiful, quiet night, where even the sword in its sheath holds its breath.